Welcome everybody back into Nerd Sesh. As always, I'm Carson Breber, and alongside me is Logan Camden, and we've got lots of great NFL football to talk about today, and we're going to start with the game of the week as it was hyped up. Ended up being a pretty convincing result on Sunday Night Football, Logan. Cowboys just thrashed the Eagles, and if I remember correctly, last week we spoke, and you still said you preferred the Lions to the Cowboys, and then we did our picks for vaulted this past week, and I picked the Cowboys to cover at that 3.5-point line, and you called the Cowboys frauds, and you said, who have they beaten? And you said, I'm taking the Eagles, baby. How are you feeling about all that right now?
Humbled. I was all week long, dude, even into through the weekend, I was telling everybody that would listen, Eagles are free money, and I would take them by 7 in this game.
Wow.
I couldn't have been more wrong, you know? The Eagles are hitting, or have played the two toughest opponents on their schedule this entire season, and they've chosen to play two pretty poor football games. I mean, this is the worst part of the season to choose to hit your skid, right? You know, some teams that maybe struggle earlier in the year as the season goes along, right? The Niners, you hit your skid in the middle, oh, it doesn't matter. You catch fire right before the playoffs and keep going. The Eagles definitely have to figure some things out, but I also want to just give credit to Dallas for how great they were situationally in this one. I mean, anytime Philadelphia had a drive that was building to anything in this game, they forced timely turnovers. I mean, 3 turnovers in Dallas territory in this game. That completely swings the tide and opens it up, but you know, Philly couldn't stop Dallas in the middle of the field, Carson, and that is where, you know, I think we really need to be concerned about this Philadelphia team is defensively. Dallas carved them up. If it was running the football up the middle with Pollard, they got good push with their guys up front, and then over the middle of the field, I mean, Dak was phenomenal. Again, attacking the middle of the field, and their guys made plays. We see the Philly secondary and guys in the middle field struggle with coverage again, struggle with tackling, and they struggled to get pressure right off the bat, and Dallas also did a phenomenal job of getting the ball out early. I'm not ready to make any big-time declarations about this game, and I want to be clear about why I haven't liked the Cowboys this year. You get burnt by somebody enough, you stop rooting for them. It's like Philadelphia. The past 2 seasons in basketball, I take Philadelphia to do something in the playoffs, and they choke. Well, I'm going to hop off that wagon. Carson, we've been covering the NFL for 4 years now doing this show, and for the past 3 of those years, I have taken the Dallas Cowboys to do something in the playoffs. That's just why I can't buy back in, is they've burnt me 3 consecutive years when I've picked them to do something. The one thing that this game reinforced to me, Carson, or enforced to me, is that the Eagles are a lot closer to the Cowboys than either of these teams are to the 49ers.
Absolutely. And the reason that this Cowboys team feels different to me, feels better than the previous iterations, is because of the level that Dak Prescott is playing at. Historically, Dak has been a top 10 level guy for them, sure, but he's also been prone at times to making too many killer mistakes. He's never been this consistently efficient, this consistently poised, and over the last 8 weeks, ever since that embarrassing game against the 49ers, Dak Prescott has been sensational. He has been the most consistently great quarterback in the NFL. Over 8 games, Logan, a passer rating of 118.5, averaging over 300 yards per game with 23 touchdowns to 2 picks, averaging 8.4 yards per attempt in that span. The guy is just playing almost flawless football right now, and if it weren't for the late game gaffes that really has become characteristic of the Cowboys in recent years against the Eagles in the game that they lost, they would be undefeated in that time. So I understand that there has been skepticism up to this point about the Cowboys blowing out a lot of bad teams, and particularly if their defensive statistics have been inflated by going up against really just an atrocious slate of quarterbacks this year. And there is some truth to that, right? When you're playing the Giants and you're playing the Jets and you're just playing all these miserable offenses that they have, but they still have the superior defense to the Eagles. I don't think that we can deny that at this point. Even if you don't think the Cowboys defense is as good as being 5th in yards per play, the number 4 scoring defense would say, and I understand that they actually have had some legitimately bad games against really good offenses. If it was the Niners earlier in the year, if it was the Seahawks just this past week, when it does come to them facing legitimately good offenses, this super aggressive, blitz-heavy scheme where they're leaving their corners on an island, are those guys great enough in coverage for that defense to hold up against really good competition? It hasn't been the most convincing. But at the same time, this Eagles defense is just flat out not good. There's nothing anymore to indicate other than what we saw last year that this is a good defense. They have been consistently allowing offenses to produce above their typical level. I mean, they could not get a stop in this game, and that's against a great offense, but it's a trend, man, and it is a trend that has been week in, week out since the start of the year. They come into this game 22nd in yards per play allowed, 24th in scoring defense. The linebackers are just too bad. The secondary, I do think we've seen the corners regress a bit at this point. So if Dak is going to be the convincingly better quarterback than Jalen Hurts, which I know Hurts was MVP favorite just a couple weeks ago, but at that time, Logan, you'll remember, on this very show, I said, I think Dak is playing better than him right now. It's just the Eagles are eking out these really tight wins, and Hurts is the face of that. And if they are going to have the convincingly better defense, then they probably are the better football team. I still think the margin between these two is very close. Honestly, I think whoever has home field advantage in a playoff setting, I am going to probably pick to win that game. But I did have a feeling coming into this one, the gap between these two just isn't nearly large enough for Philly to win twice, for them to beat Dallas on their home field. And these are just two teams that are trending in the opposite directions right now.
For sure, and I think it would come down to home field advantage when picking between these teams in a playoff scenario. It's tough, dude. I'm always going to be skeptical about the Dallas Cowboys because it's who they are. I mean, until they get this monkey off their back, which is the fact that they've not been to an NFC title game, the fact they haven't been to a Super Bowl in over, damn near 30 years now, that's the only reason I'm going to be skeptical with the boys is because of the brand. But this team is uber talented, and you're exactly right, man. The gap between this defense is massive. And when Dak is playing like this, it kind of negates the skill position talent gap that this team has, the Philadelphia Eagles. So it's real, man. And the Cowboys, too, the defensive playmakers, that's what's huge, too, man. If it's Bland, if it's Gilmore, if it's Micah, I don't think the Eagles have playmakers like that. I think the only advantage that I would give to Philadelphia is their pass rush. And, again, you see it here. A pass rush, and hear me out on this, Carson, you can negate the value of a pass rush, right? Because I think it's still one of the most dominant front four in the league. But you see what Dallas does in this game and how you can counteract that. When there's not a solid front seven behind them, if you're getting the ball out early and you're just saying, it doesn't matter if you're beating guys at the line or straight up, it takes that away. You're getting your ball into the hands of playmakers, and you're making them face a back seven that is really, really weak and has consistently looked weak throughout this season. It's just the brand, man. That's why it's the only edge, but I do think this gap is a lot closer. I think these teams are neck and neck, man. I think this is going to be an absolute duel if we get a matchup between these two in the playoffs.
And the only reason that I winced at all when you said that about preferring the Eagles pass rush is not because I don't think that front from the Eagles is still elite. I mean, you are talking about the depth of that defensive line rotation, but also the star talents there. 100%. That's a great pass rush. I just think Dallas's is every bit as good. And Micah Parsons is clearly, to me, one of the three most game-breaking defensive talents in the league today. Just such a jaw-dropping player to watch consistently. We've never seen a dude blend that sort of strength and size with bendiness and speed like that. I mean, he is unbelievable. And obviously has DeMarcus Lawrence alongside him, and there's good guys on that front, but he alone has such a massive impact on any one game. So we're talking about Dak and the level that he's playing at right now. How many quarterbacks do you think you would take over him for a playoff run this year with how he's playing right now?
That's a loaded question. With how Dak's playing right now, I would take no quarterbacks above him. Dak Prescott is playing the best football of any quarterback, I think, in the National Football League.
But there's still some projection to be done here right now. You would take him for a 3 to 4 game postseason run over Patrick Mahomes?
What I'm saying is that if I could bank on Dak Prescott playing at this level consistently for 4 weeks, I wouldn't take any other quarterback above him. Now, knowing how this thing ebbs and flows, right? If you ask this question at different points in the season, you can insert and put in any quarterback, right? You put in Jared Goff at a certain point of the season, right? And you could say that. But I would take Patrick Mahomes. I would take Josh Allen. I would take Lamar Jackson.
Yep.
That might be it. Dak might be 4 right now.
I think I'm there with you when you consider Burrow is hurt and Herbert now has fractured his finger. I don't know if he'll be 100% healthy, if he'll be able to play at the same level that we're accustomed to from him. And frankly, just regardless of that. And I understand that the circumstances for him aren't great and he is having to overcome a lot, but I just think Dak in a vacuum has been better over this past 8 weeks because he's been better than just about everybody. So I think he has to be in that 4-5 range. And you're absolutely right. It's just the surgical precision with which he is dissecting defenses right now, how quickly he is getting the ball out, how quickly he is making the right decision over and over again, never forcing the issue. And that was part of the challenge last year was he was so set on pushing the ball downfield all the time. And that was just really the identity of the offense under Kellen Moore, that would lead to more turnovers. And at now he's just in a place where he's taking whatever the defense gives him and they still hit on some big chunk plays. He makes some beautiful throws downfield, but he's so smart and so efficient.
And I just want to give a big shout out to some of the other Cowboys that aren't getting love when Dak's doing this too. I mean, Ferguson in terms of after the play ability, CD Lamb, you know, it's like you mentioned, it's not just Dak playing so much better, it's the conglomerate. And I think the guy that nobody wants to give flowers to in this situation, I'll do it. Mike McCarthy's been a great offensive play caller for the Cowboys this year and dialing stuff up. I mean, like I said, I think this is the collective. It's great talent, offensive line, skill position, Dak. It's McCarthy calling great plays too, and it's everybody executing. But I was really, really skeptical this season, depending on McCarthy calling an offense while being the head coach too. I thought it was going to be a colossal disaster, and it has been, this is probably the best season we've seen from Dak Prescott since he got injured midway through, another MVP caliber year.
Yeah, he has been every bit at that level, if not better. And it is more impressive to me because of how long he has sustained it for. And you're right. This is an offense that has been consistently great over these last 3 years, but this is the best version that we've seen. I mean, they're putting up over 32 points per game. They are the number one scoring offense in football right now. And the weapons absolutely have progressed here. Ferguson, very, very solid. Brandon Cooks is just such a good number 2 receiver, and it's been so valuable that they've really found that role and that rhythm with him in these last 6 weeks, and he's starting to have the impact that we know that he's capable of. And I think CeeDee's just flat out a top 5 receiver in football right now. And as good as he was last year, he was not at that level where to now every single week we're like, this guy's going to get you 100 yards and a touchdown. And it's just become a very, very dynamic, very impressive unit. But on the flip side of this, the Eagles, man, we've talked about the dichotomy of, is the bottom going to fall out here? They've been playing all of these close games where they play down to competition and then they just find a way at the end. Or is that a legitimate formula for them to just keep winning week in, week out? We've now seen the consecutive losses to very good opponents, but in which they've been soundly outplayed. How worried are you about them?
I'm worried more about the caliber of competition that they've played. And again, the timing of this skid is... Again, the Eagles' schedule has not been that brutally hard up to this point. These were the 2 prove-it games on your schedule where you're supposed to go handle business against 2 of the best teams in the NFL. Stamp your name as the, Super Bowl frontrunner if you convincingly beat these teams. Instead, the Eagles drop both of them in convincing fashion. I'm worried that they're not going to have time to find their footing against a good football team before the playoffs come around. You know what I mean? The Eagles don't really have another test the rest of the way. And I wish they did play a good football team. I mean, Seattle is probably their toughest matchup the rest of the way. They go to Seattle. They play the Cardinals at home. And then they've got the Giants twice. I'm just worried about them finding their formula against another good football team before the time comes. And I'm really worried about this defense, dude. I mean, it doesn't look like they can stop anybody. And again, it's about the one-game scenario. If the Eagles have 1 or 2 turnovers and their defense gets marched on consistently, they could very well be one and done. I'm very worried about Philadelphia. And they look a lot more human than they did 2 weeks ago, man. I'm very concerned. Yeah. And they need I don't know, Carson. I think they need 4 bounce-back wins, 4 convincing victories over opponents that I consider to be less than them. I don't think any of these teams are remotely close to Philadelphia's level, and I think they should convincingly beat all of them.
Yeah, I think that there is still, to me, clearly a gap between the top 3 teams in the NFC and the field. And there was a time where we lumped Detroit into that conversation with Dallas. I don't think that we can put them there anymore. I think that the talent gap there has been exposed, and I think that Detroit defense is certainly the most concerning out of any of these teams that we can talk about. Dallas has a chance to legitimately leapfrog Philly to me if we see their defense continue to really hold up against the Bills and against the Dolphins and against the Lions over these 3 weeks. I just want a little bit more of a sample size of that defense against legitimately good offenses. But I'm not panicking about Philly. They are certainly flawed, though. And a few weeks ago, I felt like this is probably still the best team in football in a year where nobody is really that outstanding. They have elite talent, and I don't feel comfortable saying that anymore. I absolutely think that there is a large gap between the Niners since they got over that 3-week slump and since Purdy stopped making those mistakes and they've just been humming. That clearly looks like a team that's in a tier of its own again. And Philly's been outgained by 75 or more yards in 6 straight games now, man. And they're 4-2 in that stretch. Good for them. And they've played some really good football teams. But that's not a fluke. You don't get outgained by 75-plus yards in 6 straight games and be able to claim that you're a legitimately great football team. They should have lost to the Bills. They were outplayed in that game. They have just gotten by the skin of their teeth out of so many of these games. And this one, maybe the score is a bit misrepresentative of the gap between the two teams because Philly has the 3 unfortunate fumbles, all of which they're moving the ball with some success and then just totally get their momentum killed. But also, they got the defensive touchdown in this game. So their offense put up 6 points. Like, Dallas was much better. If you want to debate whether this should have been a 20-point game or a 14-point game, fine. But, like, Dallas kicked their ass. And this defense is just too concerning for me right now to have them in a tier with San Francisco. And I don't think that Jalen Hurts has been quite the same guy as last season. We know that he's been dealing with some bumps and bruises throughout the year. He's been less efficient as a passer, fewer yards per attempt. We saw the turnovers really an issue early in the year. Not so much as of late, but I just still don't feel that he's been as good a decision maker overall, and he hasn't been as lethal with his legs or as willing to use his legs. Now, in short yardage situations, in goal line situations, yes, he's going to rack up those 3rd and 4th down conversions when it's 3rd and 1, 4th and 1, and he is going to punch the ball in on the goal line. He's absolutely dominant there. But I'm talking about the real high upside scrambles. This is a guy who's rushing for over 50 yards a game last year. He's down to about 34 this year, so he just hasn't been quite the same level threat there. So he had to play so well for them to be really right in that Super Bowl. He didn't have to play too well up to that point, but of course they beat a Niners team that didn't have a quarterback. So ultimately, I think this isn't the same team as last year. If Hurts isn't a top 5 kind of quarterback, and the just depletion of this linebacking core and the regression of the secondary, it's all concerning. I still think they beat anybody other than Dallas or San Francisco in the NFC for sure, but they're definitely right neck and neck with Dallas and comfortably behind San Francisco.
And is it close with I don't know. I guess we'll get to this in a minute. I wanted to ask about if you thought that if Detroit is if the gap between them, Dallas, and Philly is still, would you give Detroit a chance against them still?
I would give them a chance. I would consider them a significant underdog though, because even though Philly's defense hasn't improved how I thought it would, I thought this would still be a top 10 defense, and they just haven't rounded into anything close to that form. They still have an elite unit. I still buy into their talent more. Detroit, I just look at over an extended sample size, and I'm like, that defense is struggling. And the other biggest red flag for their team, which was, can Goff sustain this level of turnover-free, controlled play? He is very much going in the wrong direction. So it's like when your two biggest red flags are going crazy at the moment, that's very concerning to me. But when you talk about red flags, Logan, for a contender, you got to talk about the Kansas City Chiefs wide receivers. And yet again, it was just an unbelievable Kadarius Toney mental error that costs them this game against the Buffalo Bills. What did you take away from Buffalo going into Kansas City and handing the Chiefs their second straight loss?
Yeah, we can start with Buffalo. Shout out Josh Allen for putting on another masterclass. Another good bounce.
That's generous.
I mean, another great Josh Allen game. I like giving Josh his flowers when that happens. When Josh plays a great game, because I just feel like it gets a regular Josh Allen grade is greatly underappreciated, and it's so much more than an average, standard QB game.
Yeah.
The one throw he made, oh my gosh, dude! I've never the fadeaway parallel to the sideline throw. I don't know, man. Like I've never seen anything like that. It's such a pleasure getting to watch these two quarterbacks go to battle, man. And it's another good win for the Bills offense and this team that just needs to rally. They're not out of the hunt yet, man. And if you're looking at other teams in the AFC, with the Chargers losing Herbert, with the Browns having to rely on Joe freaking Flacco in 2023, with the Bengals eking out games with Jake Browning, with the Steelers plummeting, the Bills are in it. The Bills still have a real chance at getting into the playoffs, and I don't think you want to run into the Bills. Look, man, I know the Bills are still... Let me make this clear. You're completely fine with running into the Buffalo Bills. You don't want to run into good Josh Allen on a good Sunday in the playoffs, because Josh Allen can carve you up and single-handedly put you in your grave on a Sunday and end your season. You just don't want to see that guy. I still have issues with the rest of this Bills team. They're not perfect. This defense has stepped up and played better. They're not perfect, but the Bills are a scary freaking wild card team, man. And if they can get in there, I give them a chance to, just because of the prowess and the ability that Josh Allen has, I give the Bills an opportunity to win a playoff game and to go on a run any year, because I believe in Josh Allen like that, man. So it's another good win and another way to get back on track. It's crazy how this one ends. We'll get into that in a minute, but I wouldn't want to run into the Bills in the playoffs, man. They are probably the one wild card team I would not want to draw.
They are by far the best wild card team in the AFC. Like everybody else you look at, and there are major concerns. Like you are talking about teams down their starting quarterback. If it's the Steelers, inept offensively, no offense. The Flacco show is fun, man, but that quarterback position in that offense is still concerning. The Colts, I just don't think are good. Texans, Stroud is going to be all right. But, this is a team that we've talked about. Obviously has the talent of a contender, is still top 5 in terms of point differential, could easily be 11-2 right now if they hadn't beat themselves in mind-blowing ways, if it's costly turnovers, if it's poor coaching, if it's literally having too many men on the field, or if it's just really untimely defensive mistakes, not being able to get stops after your offense puts you in a position to win. All of these things have had to come together for this team to only be 7-6 right now. And it's very disappointing that they are, but absolutely in an AFC that is deeply flawed. Like we talk about the top of the NFC, those to me might just be the best 3 teams in football. Like nobody in the AFC is consistently super impressive week to week. I think that the Chiefs are a prime example of that. A team that we believe in relative to the competition, but they definitely have some issues. To me, the most encouraging thing about this was that the Bills defense actually stepped up and made timely plays, because I've talked about how there have been 3 instances in recent weeks, relatively recent weeks, where Josh Allen puts you up with a go-ahead touchdown under 2 minutes to go, and you allow the worst offense in football, the Patriots, to march down and score a touchdown on you. And then you allow the Broncos to retake the lead. And the entire Eagles game, Josh played such a masterclass in that one, and they had such a convincing lead, and they just couldn't get stops when it mattered. And in this one, that was not the case. Like, they have a couple of clutch turnovers that actually the Bills offense didn't turn into points, but they got the Chiefs off the field at the end of the third quarter when they could have taken the lead. Christian Benford made a great play to punch that ball out. And then the final drive was so encouraging. Now, they did allow a touchdown if Kadarius Toney had lined up on sides, so you can't say that they were perfect, but it was a really good stand at the end where the pass rush got home and they collapsed the pocket around Pat, and he just had nowhere to go with the football. Von Miller actually made an impact play, which I could not believe my eyes to see. Like, multiple guys got home, but he played part in a sack. Ed Oliver did an awesome job on third down getting his hand on that football. So that was just great. This is a defense that has been so decimated by injuries to Milano, to Trey White, to Daquan Jones. I mean, Micah Hyde has been hurt at spots, and even within this game goes down with injury multiple times. So for them to come up and win this game when the offense did sputter in that second half, that was very good to see. But I will say, I was terrified in the home stretch of this game because this was every bit the same feeling that the Bills have given in recent weeks, where it's like, oh my God, they're playing well. Well, they've actually mostly had slow starts, but in the Eagles game and in this game, it's like they're rising to the occasion against a good opponent and they're dominating, and then they just can't quite keep that level up, and then it's great. Patrick Mahomes has the ball with under 2 minutes to go, and all he needs is a field goal to tie and a touchdown to win. There's a feeling of dread there, and I think that that was largely because the Bills' offensive supporting cast had a real yikes showing in this second half. Josh was constantly under pressure. The receivers just could not separate. The line couldn't protect. Now, I do give a lot of props to a Chiefs defense that has consistently played really well against high-end competition. I tweeted this out. They faced 4 of the top 6 scoring offenses in football now, and they have allowed those teams to put up 17.3 offensive points per game. That's just taking away the 1 pick 6 against Detroit that obviously does not fall on the Chiefs defense. That's legit, man. And nothing comes easy against them. But this is another game where Gabe Davis has 0 yards. Stephon Diggs played his worst game maybe as a Buffalo Bill. Not only does he have really minimal production, he's got 3 drops. 1 on a third down, 2 on screens, including a particularly costly one before the 2-minute warning when the Chiefs still have 2 timeouts. So the Bills are in field goal range. They want to bleed some clock, and because they're just not confident in their ability to run the football, their solution to that is a screen where you think, all right, worst case scenario, Diggs is tackled at the line of scrimmage, clock runs down, we either force them to use a timeout or we go to the 2-minute warning. But because he drops that, now the Bills are looking at a 2nd and 10, and so now they're totally in pass mode. All right, we got to actually make something happen here. And the next thing you know, a couple incomplete passes, and the Chiefs are in a really good position where they haven't had to use their timeout. So that was problematic. The receivers were not good. The line was consistently outplayed by the Chiefs' defensive line. But Josh made big plays. He made clutch plays. First of all, he just came out of the gate dominating. But in that second half, I mean, to me, that third down conversion that you mentioned might have been the play of the year, man. Like, nobody else does that. Actually, it's just him and Pat. Like, I can think of multiple instances, actually, of both of them doing it, where they are just hanging in there on the sideline for a second or 2 longer than anybody else would even dare to, waiting for somebody to come open. And he finds a way to do it off his back foot as his momentum is going out of bounds. And even then, bro, Latavius fumbles. And it wasn't even clear if he actually caught that ball. So luckily it didn't matter because they recovered it. But it's just like, somebody give him some help. He had a beautiful throw on another third down on that final drive, which was huge. 30 yards downfield on a rope, perfectly on target to Deontay Hardy, who did not have a lot of separation, flat-footed, couldn't really step up in that pocket. He wasn't perfect in this game. Missed a potential touchdown to Gabe Davis on that final drive where, yeah, he was under duress and the internal clock was certainly ticking there, but still a missed opportunity. He took a sack where you really would not want him to on that third down, and there were a couple instances where he's holding on to the ball for a long time. It's tough because guys aren't getting open, but it just wasn't the prettiest game for Josh overall throughout the whole 60 minutes, but he made enough special plays, and the defense stepped up, and they went out there on the road And they beat a good football team who, yes, they could have lost to if Kadarius Toney just didn't F up. And that's why I don't leave this being like, oh my God, what an outstanding performance from the Bills, because this felt like one that they could have blown at the end. But I still think the rest of the AFC is so flawed that if they can make the playoffs, they're a top 3 team. And they have convinced me, snapping back after that awful Broncos loss to where they just obliterated the Jets. They absolutely should have beaten the Eagles. We gave all the stats about how when you win the turnover margin, you have 500-plus yards and 10-plus third down conversions. Nobody's ever lost under those circumstances. I had a feeling coming into this game, and I tweeted this too, that if they could just get over blowing games in mind-blowing fashion, with the level Josh has been playing at and with the offensive inconsistency we've seen from the Chiefs, they should win, and they did. And they are playing at a higher level right now. And if Josh is going to be Josh Allen, then they are absolutely scary for anybody to face. Now, I still don't think this is a great football team. I just think Josh Allen is a superhero. And we've seen in recent years him make them a contender without having a great football team around him. So for a 7-6 squad, there is no question they are exceptionally dangerous.
They are exceptionally dangerous. I did think it was funny Gabe complaining about not getting that TD throw. You didn't think Josh was a little rushed? Like, I thought the only reason he did that corner route.
No, absolutely.
I will say I got a little bit of a joy watching Gabe get frustrated just because I don't think Gabe's that good. Cracks me up a little bit, man. They should have connected there. This is really frustrating, though, Carson, for the Kansas City Chiefs. And I don't feel bad for Chiefs fans because they're going through it right now. But, I mean, they've been spoiled the past 5 years, so they can deal with it a little bit. But it really is remarkable. I mean, you know, we talked about for so long at the start of this year, Carson, the first half of this year about the Baltimore Ravens and how they could potentially be undefeated if one play goes differently in each game. It's the exact same thing it feels like with the Chiefs in every single loss this year. The first game of the year, Kadarius Toney making boneheaded mistake after boneheaded mistake, and then drops one on the final possession of the game, right? Sinks their boat, ends the game. You've got MVS dropping a touchdown against the Philadelphia Eagles, against the Green Bay Packers. You know, you have a missed defensive pass interference. And in this one, you've got... It was such a beautiful play, man. It felt wrong. It wasn't the wrong call. Like, he was clearly offsides, and as a wide receiver... I mean, I used to work chain gang, man. Every snap, the receiver needs to turn his head and look at the ref and just point, hey, man, am I good? And he'll let you know. A boneheaded mistake for what was such an amazing play call. Like, in that scenario, to dial that up, genius. I mean, only Andy Reid, only this team.
Well, do you think that was called? The lateral? I don't think that was called.
I thought that was designed. That may have been improvised.
I think that was improvised, but an unbelievable play no matter what.
I mean, an insane play, something that you just never see. For the Chiefs to lose in that situation, you know, it's a knife to the heart. It sucks. It's brutal. But, I mean, it was the right call. And then, but I understand Patrick Mahomes' frustration completely at the end of this football game. You know what I mean? I mean, it has to have reached a boiling point. He is playing flawless freaking football games, man, and none of these losses are on his shoulders. Sure, I mean, you know, one thing goes differently, like I said, in a butterfly effect kind of way, and these outcomes are different. It just has to be so frustrating for him, and it's... I don't know, man. Again, it's like these things are never a one-off issue. It's never one thing that breaks the locker room, that breaks the team. You know what I mean? This could be the straw that breaks the camel's back. You know what I mean? For this locker room, for this team, for this group. The one thing that's abundantly clear to me, man, Kadarius Toney shouldn't be on the roster next week, right? Like, I don't know if that's to send a message to have an open roster spot to try somebody else out, man. I don't know how Kadarius Toney can be on this roster next week, dude. This is just, it's a little too much, man.
It's brutal. And I understand that he's your shiftiest guy in space, but he has directly cost you 2 football games with incomprehensible errors. And he wasn't good throughout in this one. Like, yeah, he had a couple nice plays in space, but he had an awful drop earlier too. Like, he's just not a good football player. And it's not that they have a lot of great options at receiver, but this is really, really painful for them. And it speaks to a reality with this Chiefs team that we discussed last week too, which is that regardless of what they can achieve on the back of having by far the best defense of Mahomes' career and by having Patrick Mahomes, this offense is not going to look like any previous Chiefs offense that we have seen under Patrick Mahomes. They are not going to just suddenly explode. You can only be an above average offense for so long. Like, they don't hang 30 on almost anybody, right? They've only done that a few times all year, whereas in previous seasons, that was the week in, week out expectation. So the question to me just remains, is this defense good enough to where they don't need to? And it's possible if you're talking about getting out of the AFC because it is just that good. But these receivers, man, like, there is being bad and then there is being just so stupid. Like, I don't even know how to put it. Like, there's the sort of bad where you don't notice it as much because maybe a guy just isn't creating separation. And then there's the kind of bad where it is off your hands into a pick six, drop a wide open go-ahead touchdown, line up offsides and negate a go-ahead touchdown. And that's what we've seen from these Chiefs, on top of the not separating, not really making plays. Shout out Rashee Rice. He's good. Even he has a fumble in this game. It's just a brutal situation for Patrick Mahomes. And we talked about in earlier weeks if this defense plus Mahomes could make them the best team in football. And maybe they still win the AFC. I'm definitely not discrediting their chances there because the competition is flawed. But, boy, they are never going to mow anybody down like the 49ers do. They just do not have that kind of ceiling, and we can say that definitively now.
And I know this has been discussed in recent memory, and this is probably more of a hot-button discussion now because of how great of a season he's having. But, I mean, again, to not re-sign Tyreek Hill, man, because he wanted some guaranteed money. And I know that signing Tyreek would have come with its sacrifices, right? You wouldn't have been able to build this great of a defense. Maybe you're not able to pay Chris Jones. And I don't know if it's not worth being able to pay Chris Jones because he's one of the handful of best defensive players on the planet. But it really hurts, man. I mean, Tyreek, it was peanut butter and jelly, man. I mean, it's arguably the greatest QB wideout duo of all time. And I mean that. I'm not boosting. When we're talking about the greats of all time, I appreciate them. The Rices and the Montanas, the Rices and the Youngs, the Moss and the Brady, the Big Ben and the AB, the Harrison and Peyton. You can point to whatever duo you want to point to.
You snuck one in there, but okay, I'll let it slide.
Who?
I'm just kidding. I just don't know if Big Ben is quite of the same caliber as the other guys, but AB is.
Don't do that, bro. But, I mean, Mahomes and Hill, like, are up there in terms of just what they could do on the field. And this issue, it wouldn't be a problem. Because once or twice a game, maybe more than that because we watch the games, Tyreek is breaking out for a TD. And Tyreek is breaking the game. It's just got to be frustrating, man, to go from the best wide receiver in all of football to the worst receiving core in the NFL. It just has to be such a gut punch for the best quarterback in the league, man. I know it's got to be frustrating for everybody in Kansas City.
Well, let's not forget the New England Patriots exist. We can't call this the worst receiving core in football.
You know what? You're exactly right.
Especially because Travis Kelce is still there, but it's a bottom third weapons group overall. And the reality is that they went out there and they won the Super Bowl in the first year without Tyreek. So you can't just totally malign that decision. And it has enabled them to put together a legitimately dominant defense. To me, the issue is more that they haven't spent the right resources necessarily on the wide receiver position. And Rashee Rice, if he continues to progress, maybe he can change that. But when you're talking about spending a second-round pick on Sky Moore and MVS and Kadarius Toney being the guys you go out there and make moves for, just not the best roster building there. So, good win for the Bills, painful loss for the Chiefs. I do want to shout out James Cook for just playing an awesome football game, and he's continued to get more and more involved as a receiver. He was great there in a day where not a lot was open way downfield, and he was super efficient as a runner. He's just the best running back that Josh Allen has ever played with. And the other big storyline for the Bills that we didn't get to talk about this week because we didn't do a football show after this news broke was the whole Sean McDermott story. The fact that he tried to motivate the fellas by telling them to unite like the 9/11 hijackers. That's what grabbed all the headlines. But beyond that, talk about how he just had a narcissistic personality. People saying that he blamed the offense for leaving too much time on the clock in the 13 seconds game against Patrick Mahomes. And I'm not a big McDermott fan. I think I've been clear about that. Now, I certainly appreciate what he has done for the Bills, and I think he's a good defensive coach. I just don't think he has a lot more to offer this team. So if that builds more momentum towards a decisive move, towards cleaning house, if this season continues to go how it's gone up to this point, then I'm 100% good with that. That being said, I do think that the Bills absolutely have potential to make a run now. They still need to beat the Cowboys and the Dolphins potentially. They certainly need to beat one of the two. I just wouldn't count out the possibility of them doing that. I might still pick them outright against Miami, even on the road, because I think this is a team that has found a high enough level and hopefully has stopped doing just some of the mind-blowingly awful things to where they can start to look like the Buffalo Bills that we know, not quite because of the actual losses to defensive personnel, but not a team that is losing to the New England Patriots and the New York Jets and all of the bad moments that they've had. In the NBA, the game can change in an instant, but no matter how the action unfolds, you know DraftKings Sportsbook has your back. This week, new customers can score $150 instantly in bonus bets just for betting $5 on basketball. Win or lose, you get an instant dub.
Download the DraftKings Sportsbook app now and use code NERDS. New customers can get $150 instantly in bonus bets for betting just $5 on basketball, only on DraftKings Sportsbook with code NERDS. The crown is yours.
Let's talk about another wildcard team out in the AFC, because the Cleveland Browns came up with a big win in this one. It was the Joe Flacco show, over 300 yards as they beat the Jacksonville Jaguars. What did you make of this, Logan? Is this a formula for Cleveland that you buy into, that you think can get them into the playoffs and make them a respectable opponent there?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, during their stretch when they were going, bad Deshaun, DTR, that little weird stretch in that window, I mean, I said the Browns had the best defense in football, and if they could get average, adequate quarterback play, they were a real Super Bowl contender. I think Joe Flacco can provide exactly that. And again, this has been a theme of the entire NFL year. I mentioned this stat, I believe, a week ago on the show. About a week ago. Man, dude, I'm going to hit that every episode. There have been no more through the first 14 weeks of the NFL season. In no other season in NFL history have there been more quarterbacks that have played. And it was befuddling to me that all these quarterbacks are free agents. Carson Wentz, Joe Flacco. I would take Joe Flacco over Mitch Trubisky tomorrow, man. I'm probably not saying a whole lot because it's Mitch Trubisky, but it's like...
Give us the 96 QBs. Give us the 96 QBs you would take over Mitch Trubisky. I want to hear them all.
You know what? You know what, Carson?
Yeah.
I'm going to make a TikTok. I got another new form of TikTok video I want to do creatively. I will make a TikTok of the 96 quarterbacks I would take over Mitch Trubisky. I'll make the list for you. We'll make it happen.
Can I just ask you about some dudes who people have thrown out in our Discord?
Sure.
Chad Hutchinson.
Well, no. It's Chad Hutchinson, man.
What? You're not taking Quincy Carter over Mitch Trubisky?
Oh, my God. I'd take Quincy Carter in a heartbeat.
Okay, EJ Manuel.
Oh, yeah, I guess.
Okay, Charlie Fry.
Charlie Fry sucked, man.
Yeah, okay. I thought Trubisky does too. Trent Dilfer.
Trent Dilfer won a Super Bowl. Give me Trent.
Kelly Holcomb.
Kelly Holcomb almost won a playoff game against the Steelers. Give me Kelly Holcomb.
Okay, last one, Joey Harrington.
Man, no. Joey Harrington stunk.
Okay. All right, so we have a sense of where Mitch Trubisky is. He's somewhere between Joey Harrington and Kelly Holcomb, which is great.
I think that's fair. I think that's fair. I would take Tommy Maddox off the couch tomorrow. Like I was thinking during the I went into a Mitch Trubisky spiel somehow. I don't know how we got here, man.
Because the Steelers lost to the Patriots and we didn't get a chance to talk about it.
And I'm still working my way through the pain that Thursday night football left me with. So anyway, yeah, I think the Browns, I said this when they signed Joe. I think Joe was the best quarterback option for him then. I think Joe is the best quarterback option for him now. And again, there's just value to guys that know the defense is running cover 3 this play. The safeties are doing this.
Yeah.
They're dropping into quarters. Like, Joe Flacco knows how to read a defense. Is he going to play perfectly? No. Does he have a rocket arm? No. But he can make the throws, he can be on time, and he can make enough good decisions in big plays to not screw you out of football games. I mean, Joe played a good game today. Like, a remarkably great game for a guy at this age. And the defense played an excellent game. Don't get me wrong, the Browns are not going to win any football games on the shoulders of Joe Flacco. He's not leading them like a Josh Allen. But if this defense plays well, yes, the Browns can win a playoff game. Maybe they can win too. Joe Flacco's not elite, but he's damn sure a damn good backup. And in a year like this, when we've seen so many quarterbacks go down and so many weird starters in, Joe's probably one of the better guys that you could ask for to step in and go and win you a game. I like the Browns a lot more than when they had DTR, than when they had PJ. Yeah, man, I'm all aboard the Flacco train. I wanted to come on here and say that the Browns could win the Super Bowl with Flacco, but I'm not there yet. They can win a playoff game, though.
There's no question that he is just a more capable mind and a more capable actual thrower of the football than a DTR or a PJ. And those have been their options without Deshaun, obviously. Mina Kimes tweeted out today, this was pretty late in the game, that Joe Flacco was 9 of 12 for 182 yards and 3 touchdowns against the blitz. And I think that that is really a testament just to that ability to stay composed. He's not doing anything remarkable. And if you look at those 3 touchdowns, basically all of them were either great runs after the catch or they were wide open scores. But that's what happens when you don't have guys over top and you're selling out for the blitz. And he did a really good job of making the right decisions and making the right throws there. And he's still smart. He's got a capable arm. I thought he got the ball out quickly in this one and is never going to hold on to it for too long. Like, he's perfectly willing to take those throwaways. He knows that he can't really move around too well with inside that pocket. He certainly can't move outside of it, but that's fine, man. I mean, they have had a brutal quarterback play. And it's ironic because when you think about what the biggest flaw of young Joe Flacco was, when we actually considered him a good NFL quarterback, it was being too careless with the football at times, turning it over too much. And now I'm thinking, like, boy, this guy's a good decision maker. He's pretty smart, certainly compared to what the alternatives have been. But I also thought the Browns did a very good job of getting creative to make up for some of his shortcomings. When you're looking at a 3rd-and-1 situation, they bring in DTR. He gets a big-time conversion with his legs. You have the Kareem Hunt Wildcat touchdown. Like, they did a really good job when they needed athletic dudes out there with the ball in their hands of getting it to those guys. And then this isn't a, like, great vintage Browns defensive performance where they hold the opposing team to 150 yards and 6 points, but they made big plays. They have the 4 sacks. They get the 4 turnovers, and they really brought the heat, I thought, on an injured Trevor Lawrence who was coming off of that high ankle sprain last week, and so that was effective. And I think they're the team out of all of the AFC wildcard teams who are starting quarterbackless who I believe in the most by far. Pittsburgh, I just think the situation's uglier there offensively, and I don't think that defense is quite as good as Cleveland's defense, which, by the way, I don't know if we can put it in the, like, best in the league category anymore, but it's still pretty close to that. I just think they've been letting up some more explosive performances, more yardage. The Rams had a lot of success on them last week, but it's still a good unit. But compared to the Bengals, even though they've found something with Jake Browning these last couple weeks, I just don't buy into that defense nearly as much. The Colts, again, I just don't think are very good. So props to them for making the move to bring in Joe Flacco, to bring in a guy who understands the position in the game and is able to do just enough for you to lean on your other guys, and that won them the game in this one. But for the Jags, back-to-back losses now against backup quarterbacks, by the way, after that hot 8-3 start. How concerned are you about what we're seeing from them?
I just think the Jags are mid. You know what I mean? I don't think they do anything really well on either side of the football. And I'll give the Jags a ton of credit. I thought to battle back in this football game because they were down and out. Like, they put up a lot of points fast in the second half. They got after it. And they didn't, they came back. I thought that was impressive that they were able to, put such a hellacious effort together, especially just Trevor Lawrence slinging the rock to get back and make this game competitive. But I don't know, man. I don't really I've never really considered the Jaguars a real contender. And Carson, I think until the defense takes a leap and they add real talent on that side of the football, difference makers. I like the front with Trayvon Walker. I like the guys that they have, but they don't have a real big time difference maker. And until that guy emerges on either side of the football, until Trevor Lawrence takes that bona fide leap to doing game breaking stuff on a game to game basis, or until we see a defensive guy break out like that, I'm just not going to buy the Jags stock. I'm still debating whether they're legitimately a better team than the Browns with Joe Flacco. I'm debating whether they're a better team than the Texans. Who got beat by the Jets today. I just think the Jags are – I compare a lot of guys to the equator at the quarterback position. The Jacksonville Jaguars certainly feel like the equator of NFL teams. They're probably slightly better than that, but they're just average to me, man. They don't do anything to really knock my socks off or to uplift me. And when you don't do that and you have turnover issues consistently the way the Jaguars had – I think they won a lot of easy games and ripped off a nice stretch of their schedule. I just think they're average, man.
Well, look, the reality is that they are above the equator because a lot of teams this year just suck. And the Jags still had to be doing things right to get to 8-3, but I agree with you. They're not playing very impressive football right now. They're certainly below the Ravens and the Chiefs and the Dolphins, and I would say still the Bills. Now, they did outplay the Bills. Legitimately, one of the two games this year where I would say Buffalo's been actually outplayed, but I think Buffalo's ceiling is much higher. They've been figuring things out a bit more, whereas Jacksonville, Christian Kirk on the IR now, that limits their offensive ceiling to me. The run game and the defense, not looking good in recent weeks. The last 3 weeks, they have averaged 70 rushing yards per game on 2.8 yards per carry. Been basically a non-existent run game. And then defensively, Jake Brown and the boys lit them up last week for 490 yards and 34 points. Browning's playing well these last 2 weeks, but that's a pretty dynamic showing. Doesn't reflect very well on the Jacksonville defense. And then this one, the Browns, who with Flacco in their first week, they were okay, but generally this offense has been pretty rough. Put up 389 yards and 31 points on them. I just don't view this as a very good all-around football team. I don't think it's a team that has any potential to win multiple playoff games. They would need superhero Trevor Lawrence for that to happen. And with how he's looked down their number one receiver, that's rough. And that's not to say that T-Law is responsible for nearly a majority of Jacksonville's issues. I just don't think that he has been the kind of top 5 quarterback that we expected he might be. I don't think he's taken a leap from last year. I don't think he's been nearly MVP caliber. In this game, there's multiple rough miscommunications with the receivers. 2 of those lead to interceptions. Again, he didn't really have the mobility to evade and deal with Cleveland's pressure as he normally might, and he still made some nice plays in the second half. I mean, the guy's just got so much God-given ability. He's got a beautiful arm, and you see that. And he's been good this year. He's just been underwhelming. He hasn't been a superstar-level guy, and for a team that I look at and I see a lot of average around him, that's what they would need to actually make noise in the playoffs. So I think we are definitely aligned on them. But the team that is atop the AFC, Logan, and the team that played in probably the game of the day that we're just getting to now is the Baltimore Ravens. Came up with a huge overtime win over the Rams today to get to 10-3. How impressed were you by what you saw from Lamar in Baltimore in this one?
I was really impressed with Lamar and the Ravens, and I want to mention the punt return real quick. The TD. Yeah. As Wallace is bringing that one back, he starts running, and I was watching it with my roommates, and I go, man, that dude's running really slow.
And he stumbled, too. He fully stumbled.
I was like, yeah, man, that guy's kind of running slow. I was like, I could probably catch him. And then I just see him outrun the entire defense, and then my roommate Kez looks at me, and he's like, he's running pretty slow, huh? I was like, yeah, he is. It's his first professional game ever returning punt TDs because Devin Duvernay was out with a back injury. That storyline's remarkable, but what I really want to focus in on is how great Lamar was in the clutch in this one. Huge shout-out to Matthew Stafford and Lamar Jackson. Lamar's one of the handful of the best quarterbacks in the game, and it is remarkable to me that Matthew Stafford can continue doing what he's doing at his age. He's got an insane arm. If we're just talking about arm talents in NFL history, I think Matthew Stafford is top 10 all-time, dude. Like,
where do you think he falls in the NFL today?
Top 10, right outside. I know we do the top 10 thing.
No way. Dude, I think that he might actually be 3. Well, sorry, I was just talking pure arm talent, not as an overall quarterback.
Okay.
Like, I feel like the stuff that we see from him, just pure arm talent, throwing from different angles, throwing dudes open, the velocity, the distance. Like, Mahomes and J.A. to me are clearly 1 and 2. Maybe Herbert has that sort of pure arm talent. I just don't think he uses it quite as much. Like, Stafford has the physical tools, and then he is ballsy, man.
Dude, Stafford slings it. Like, I have a massive amount of respect for Stafford. And like pure arm talent though in NFL history, I seriously think if we were doing top 10 guys, I mean Stafford might be on that list. Like Mahomes, Allen, Marino. I put Elway, I put Stafford in right up there with him. I'd have to do a full list, but I think he is. And then Lamar. The thing that is so amazing to me about Lamar, I know everybody says this about him, that he's the ideal backyard quarterback, the way he moves. I mean, Michael Vick was insane. His top-end speed, how he could evade pressure. Lamar moves like a jitterbug. It doesn't make sense the way he's able to, like, just... Yeah. It's insane, dude. The twitchiness, the stop, the start, the now you see me, now you don't. Lamar moves unlike any other quarterback I've ever seen in NFL history, and it was so remarkable to me on that final drive. Any play that he dropped back, Lamar doesn't care. He will hold on to that football for 10 seconds if he needs to, if the line and the protection is there. He will bounce around in the pocket and around forever, and I think you just see it, like the value of having that kind of play extension, that mobility, how he was able to create plays that were not there, to buy times for his receivers to get open. Lamar does that at a remarkable level in that final drive. And this entire game, I thought, was a testament to that because they don't run the hell out of the ball. It's Lamar running the ball and being this team's entire offense. And then it's Lamar buying time and making and extending plays and creating plays out of seemingly nowhere for this team to score 31 points. Offensively, Lamar's one of the best QBs in the game, and I thought this was one hell of a duel, man. I was not expecting this kind of shootout between these guys, but I love great QB play, and Matthew Stafford and Lamar Jackson put on an absolute show on Sunday, man.
QB duel of the year, in my opinion.
Yeah.
Lamar was awesome, and it's not that he was perfect, wasn't super accurate on a couple of deep throws where he had guys open. I will say I was so impressed by OBJ. On his touchdown, flips his hips twice, man. Like 2 full-on adjustments to the ball, and earlier he had to fully flip his hips on another one. Like, he was just out there making plays, diving after doing that. Isaiah Likely also balled, and I just think that that's great for this team down Mark Andrews, seeing dudes other than Zay Flowers step up to that extent where you're like, oh, those are playmakers. Those are dudes in a playoff game. But it was what you said. I mean, just unbelievable play extension, unbelievable ability to make plays with his legs, and then some timely, big-time clutch throws. Obviously, the 3rd and 17 to tie this game up in regulation from Lamar was just special. Threw that ball on a rope to Zay Flowers. This is the most consistently good team in the AFC. I think this is top to bottom the most talented team in the AFC, and that's what I said before the year. I picked them to be my 1 seed, and it's huge for them to win a game like this because you talked earlier about what their reputation has been, what their issue has been. It's just closing out games that they should win. The Colts game, the Steelers game, the Browns game, those are their 3 losses. All of those were firmly in their control. They outplayed the opposition, it felt like. 4th quarter, they were in control, and then they found a way to lose. So even though it's not Lamar driving down the field at the end of the game to win this for them, he drove them down the field to tie the game. And then the very timely punt return, maybe that's sort of an outlier play. But at the end of the day, they won a game like this. That's very big for their optimism when you're talking about making a postseason run where you're going to have to do that playing against other legitimately good teams. But this honestly, to me, said a lot about the Rams too. Like, I was so impressed. Stafford is still scary good. Like, we wondered last year as he was dealing with that injury, we only got the 8-game sample size, how far he had fallen off from when 2021, I mean, he was a top 5 quarterback. He had the 40 touchdowns. He won the Super Bowl and was great in that run. I don't think he's that far off from that level, man. Like, he is a special arm talent, and he is an aggressive thrower of the football. And this offense is humming. They're averaging 35 points per game over their last 3 games, and that includes outings against the Browns and Ravens defenses, who I think we consider top 5 units. Like, unbelievably impressive stuff. And they'd already won 3 straight coming into this week, but I think that this game maybe moved me the most in terms of my view of the Rams, just seeing them do it against a team of this caliber, seeing them sustain and even improve upon the level of play that they've been at. And I don't know, again, when we talk about this NFC wildcard race, that anybody is all that good, but I think that the Rams are playing at a pretty damn good level, and they've got winnable games down the stretch. They're going to lose to the Niners on the road, but outside of that, Commanders, Saints, Giants, I think they probably finish 9-8, firmly in the mix, and one of the hotter teams in the conference and in the NFL, and a huge portion of that is owed just to Stafford and this receiving core as well, which is legitimately good, of course. Kupp and Puka had an unbelievable catch in this game, but they're playing good football right now.
And I hope the Rams make the playoffs, man. I just think it would make it a lot more entertaining. A volatile offense that can put up points in a real hurry. Like you said, I don't know if it's going to happen because they've lost some really close, back-breaking games that determine playoff races. But I really hope that the Rams make it because I think they're better too. Like, I mean, who do you like? Do you like the Seahawks or the Rams more? I think I like L.A. just because of the offensive ceiling.
I think I'm probably with you. It's pretty damn close. And a few weeks ago, I didn't give too much credit to the Rams for beating Seattle for the second time this season. But with the level that they've been at offensively recently, I mean, they're both really flawed teams, but that's the reality with kind of anybody here. Like, obviously, the Cowboys are going to take the first wild card spot. Then I think the Packers are playing the next best football in terms of the wild card teams. And then I think the Rams are playing the next best football. Now they've got to overcome being a game behind the Vikings and probably the Packers, presuming that they take care of business against the New York Football Giants. But I don't think that they're incapable of doing that, especially against Minnesota, because they're just a better football team right now. So props to them. But a team that has been a staple at the top of the NFC that, as we talked about earlier, has started to struggle as of late. The Detroit Lions, Logan, just get beaten pretty soundly by the Bears. Is it time for them to hit the panic button?
A little bit, man. A little bit. And I've been holding out hope that the Lions defense is going to find its footing. That Jared Goff would fix some of his turnover issues. This was a disastrous game for the Lions, and probably the worst one that I've seen them play all year. Offensively, this was a disaster. You see Jared Goff with multiple turnovers once again. Amon-Ra St. Brown plays arguably his worst football game in a Detroit uniform. Multiple drops in this one. He's been one of the handful, probably the 10 best receivers in football this year. I mean, just uncharacteristic performance from him. You've got 2 starters out on the offensive line for Detroit in this one. I thought that was important. I thought that, they weren't able to hold up and that a lot of pressure got home on Goff. But, all the struggles with the offense, and again, they only put up 13 points. I mean, it has to be the defense that you focus in on, allowing the Chicago Bears to move the ball on you like this. Carson, it's the 9th time this season they've allowed 300 yards of total offense to an opposing offense. And even worse so, it's their 5th consecutive week allowing 300 yards of total offense. Again, I talk about trends and moving into the playoffs and momentum. A really bad trend at the end of the season when defenses get better as the year goes along. Detroit's has steadily, seemingly gotten worse. And the worst issue I think that Detroit has defensively, because I think that they've got building blocks. Aleem McNeil, Aiden Hutchinson, Jack Campbell I like in the middle. There are individual pieces here I like more. The biggest issue that I think Detroit has is there is a severe lack of really good athletes on this defense. And I thought you see this, the option attack, they're running play actions with Justin Fields. Guys can't bring him down. Guys can't keep up with Fields. That's one thing if it's D linemen, but it's defensive backs too. It's linebackers that can't keep up with them. And then you see it when they get the ball into the hands of Chicago's playmakers. They can't hold on or tackle DJ Moore. They can't bring down the running backs. I think Detroit just need more guys who are fast, who are strong, and who can bring guys down. I think I severely underestimated, Carson, the lack of talent on Detroit's defense. Again, there are individuals, guys, that I like here that I think are building blocks for the future at different levels. If it's C.J. Gardner-Johnson, if it's Aiden Hutchinson, if it's Aleem McNeil, there's a lot of individual guys that I like, but there's a severe lack of depth, of talent, and real athleticism here throughout each level of Detroit's secondary. Of their defense. Carson, to keep it frank, I cannot consider Detroit to be a legitimate contender. I mean, it seems like a 3-horse race in the NFC after this week, right?
100%. And I know that you were still Lions above Cowboys last week, but I was certainly starting to feel this way. And if I look at what are the most likely playoff outcomes, that they beat the Eagles or the Niners in the divisional round, or that they lose to the Packers in the wild card round, it is definitely the latter. They obviously just lost to the Packers, but they're not on the level of the elite NFC teams, and it's because of the defense, first and foremost. As you mentioned, 28 points per game allowed in the last 5 games, 366 yards per game allowed, and shout out to Fields because he played well, and he's been playing well. And he's been pretty efficient as a passer and making the most of his athletic advantages. And as we've discussed, I don't think that the door is closed for him in Chicago. I think if he plays well enough down the stretch here, they will trade that number 1 overall pick and they will get crazy value for it. And I'm not necessarily opposed to that. We'll see the level that he continues to play at. I believe that Caleb is a better quarterback talent and a higher upside guy than Fields at this point, but he's playing good football. But it's what you said. I mean, it's been week in, week out. Everybody is having very good showings against this Detroit Lions defense. And then on the flip side, Jared Goff has 8 turnovers in the last 4 weeks. And this week, it's not the turnovers necessarily that concern me because both of the picks are on 4th and long where he's got to try to make something happen. But just his overall level of play has dipped. I thought he had multiple dangerous plays outside of that, a bit boneheaded, and the trend is just not good. The trend of Jared Goff being like the most turnover reverse quarterback in football last year and then through the first half of this season, he's always had that instinct, man. It was the thing that killed them when he was with the Rams is you're just waiting for that dumb play, and he slipped back into that enough to where combining those two factors, I'm out on Detroit as a team that can win multiple playoff games. Like maybe they still beat some crappy NFC wildcard team, but if they did draw the Packers, I don't know that I would pick them outright in that game.
I don't know if I would either. I mean, they're certainly not the team that's playing the better football. And the other thing that I think causes concern for me with Detroit, I know it's a cool gimmick. It's nice that Dan Campbell likes to put his nuts on the table and go for it on 4th down. Sometimes, situationally, man, I just wonder what Detroit is doing. There were a few instances in this game where I'm like, I don't know, punt the ball, give your defense better field position, and you can just shoot yourself in the foot and give away free points. And Dan went for it in a couple situations I disagreed with in this one. It's a cool gimmick, and when it works, it works. It's awesome. You know, and sometimes it swings games for Detroit. I just think sometimes he can get a little over-aggressive. I wouldn't. I picked Green Bay in the preseason. I didn't expect this return, this dramatic in-season turnaround from Green Bay. I kind of counted them off and put all my chips in on Detroit being the team to beat in the NFC North. I no longer feel that way, man. Green Bay is playing the better football, and I think I would pick them to beat Detroit if they played next week.
Yeah, and the 4th down aggression dialed up to 10 in this game because once they went down 2 touchdowns, they were just going for it no matter the distance. And it was a bit sad to see how they fared in those situations, but still not the most depressing thing that happened today, Logan. So we introduced this last week. What was your depressing moment of the day for week 14?
I mean, it had to be Vikings-Raiders. That crushed my soul as a football fan, man. How do you go an hour of football and you score 3 points? I mean, at that point, just tie a bow on it and let's tie, right, fellas? We'll go out and we'll all get Sundays or something at the local burger joint, yeah? You know?
Sounds nice.
What the hell, man? Josh Dobbs, like, that was probably the most depressing aspect of this is, I know we were waiting on it. You know how astronauts have to, like, relearn how to walk after they get back from space? You know, like, they have to figure out their legs and stuff again and get all that out. Josh Dobbs, the astronaut, is going to have to learn how to play football after that performance again, man. 10 of 23, 60 yards passing. It's just sad. And if I'm the Raiders, dude, how do you lose this game? You're at home. You have to muster one touchdown drive. You pitch a shutout. That game just perplexed me as a fan, and I think somebody said this on Twitter. That game single-handedly set us back 100 years as a society and as football fans.
Yeah.
So I think unequivocally that had to be the depressing moment. Did you have anything else that bummed you out quite like that game?
Well, that was a real bummer, man, and it was a historical outlier of a game. We have not had a 3-0 final score since 2007 when your Steelers beat the Dolphins by that score. And the next most recent was 1993 when the Jets beat Washington. And by the way, I just looked this one up. The Raiders had 8 first downs in this game. That hasn't happened since 2015 when the Raiders also did it. And they actually managed to win that game against the Denver Broncos 15-12. But just a really, really rough football game. I did take some pleasure in it, though. I was like so engrossed by the fact that nobody was going to score all game that I was rooting for punts. I was excited by it, but it is a bummer to see Josh Dobbs mania come to a really rough end like this.
You know what's weird about that Steelers-Dolphins game that you mentioned, Carson? That's an outlier too, because this is a game played in a dome. You know, there's no weather conditions. This is just two shitty teams playing to 3-0. That Steelers-Dolphins game was an infamously muddy and rainy game. Like, they couldn't throw it. You know, you got guys slipping and sliding over the field. I remember, I think a punt, if I remember correctly.
Yeah,
it was so rainy and wet. A punt got stuck in the ground, man. Like, to get to 3-0 in that game is at least understandable. Like, this game, in circumstances like this, legitimately 30 years, that's unreal to comprehend, to think about, man.
Yeah. The other moments that stand out to me is Justin Herbert getting hurt in what was already just a really, really rough performance. The Chargers, they just grow more depressing by the day. And the same goes for Bryce Young's situation with the Carolina Panthers. Dude, 13 of 36 in this game. I wish I had the last time we saw a completion rate that low with that volume of attempts. Brutal. And he has the one fumble/pick, it was called a fumble, where there's literally 4 Saints defensive linemen swarming him, and the poor little guy's just trying to get the ball out, and there's no chance. He is just getting eaten alive week in, week out, and I certainly don't think he's a talent the caliber of Stroud. I also don't think that any young quarterback would look very good in this Carolina situation. Just consistently depressing. So those were the standouts for me. Totally agree on the Raiders-Vikings choice, of course. Before we get out of here, what's one quick takeaway that you have from today's action that doesn't involve one of the games that we've already gone in depth about?
You know, man, I've caught a lot of flack over these past
it's a Baker take.
6 or so weeks about this football team. Yeah, you already knew it was going to be, man. I've taken a ton of flack about backing Baker and backing the Buccaneers. Well, you know what, man? I'll take my victory lap while I can before the Bucs blow it next week. They're 6-8. They're atop the NFC South, and you're damn right. Baker led a game-winning drive. Again, dude, I just had a complete misdiagnosed. I just was completely lost on all of the endings of these games. The Ravens one, I go, man, that guy's moving pretty slow, and then he scores the TD. In the Bucs game on that final drive, Carson, I literally go, man, dude, is something wrong with Baker's arm? Like, he looks horrible. And then he ends up throwing the game-winning TD. So I was just completely wrong on all the games today. I said the Eagles are going to win. Just a whiff of a Sunday for me. But the Bucs are atop the NFC South. There is a chance Baker led a game-winning drive. I'm going to flex my muscle while I can. Thank you for keeping me alive another week, Baker.
Baker sucked in this game, dude. Like, I understand that he got them the go-ahead touchdown. Good for him. He was 14 of 29 with 144 yards, and I was absolutely there with you, bro. He was spraying balls all over the field on that final drive. So he does have dog in him. You see it on the rushing touchdown, too. Baker's got dog. Congrats. He's still not good. Maybe they will win the NFC South. But that is the most underwhelming division I have ever seen. None of those teams are even arguably good. Mediocre is the most generous adjective I will give to any of the three of them. Yeah, congrats, man. They won a football game against another team that is every bit as thoroughly mediocre as them. And speaking of thoroughly mediocre, man, I don't mean to rag on them, but the Colts had won a few football games in a row, and they were sitting in a playoff position in the AFC. And I talked about last week how they just do not impress me. That happened again in this one. They just got dogged by Jake Browning and the Bengals, and I just don't see anything that they do well. I think that Baker is too volatile. I think that the run game is volatile. I think that the defense is mediocre. I think that the weapons outside of Michael Pittman aren't very good. Just not a good football team, and I know they're sitting at 7-6, but I don't give them any attention as a legitimate playoff caliber team. The other takeaway that I have, though I'm doing two here, I'm cheating, is that the Jets just have the best defense in the NFL, man. And I've thrown that out there before. I've soft launched it, hard launching it now. Like, it is disgusting what they do to the league's elite quarterbacks week in, week out. All year, quarterbacks have thrown for 14 touchdowns to 12 picks against them, just over 2,000 yards, 2,086. They were second in yards per play allowed coming into this game, number one in pressure rate, fourth in points per drive allowed. Like, the bottom line scoring defense number isn't going to do them justice because they are dealt so many shitty fields because of how bad their offense is. Not in this one. Shout out to Zach Wilson, played a solid game. But those horrible opposing quarterback numbers are facing a lot of elite quarterbacks. Like, that's when they've gone up against Mahomes and Dak and Hurts and Josh Allen twice and Herbert and now CJ Stroud and Tua. Like, they have made so many great quarterbacks play by far their worst game of the year. They ate CJ alive today. He had 81 passing yards, got sacked 5 times, and Houston couldn't run the ball. Just another dominant showing from the best defense in football that isn't going to do anything because Aaron Rodgers is hurt and Zach Wilson sucks. But you know what, man? He is certainly better than Tim Boyle, who threw 1 touchdown to 13 interceptions in his college career at UConn, and it was disrespectful that they ever started him. He sucks on another level entirely. Shout out to the Jets defense.
I don't have the exact numbers. I'm not a human calculator like Carson, but I have to assume that me and him have a higher career QBR in college than Tim Boyle, right?
Yeah, probably.
I mean, that's got to be like negative QBR kind of stuff right there. And also, I don't understand, man, how the Jets defense is dominated this much. Ton of credit to the personnel, too, and the talent, because they are very talented. How can people still hate or discredit what Robert Saleh is doing right now, man? Like, I think he is. I've heard some people say that they think he's a bad coach or something. I don't know. I think Saleh's one of the best in the league, man.
Yeah. I think it's the same dynamic where people will, like, rag on Tomlin. Well, Tomlin's obviously a better version. I think Tomlin is one of the best coaches we've ever seen, certainly one of the best coaches of this generation. But you're doing so many impressive things defensively, and that's getting you to a spot where you're always competitive and you're winning games and you're a defensive-minded coach. So it's like that's what you think that guy's most responsible for, and they're doing great there. At the same time, it's like, well, you're not fielding a competent offense, and as head coach, you do have responsibility for that as well. You can't just be like, especially because Tomlin has personnel decision-making authority as well. You can't just be flat out like, oh my God, how incredible that you're winning with these awful quarterbacks, when you are also responsible for the offense to some extent. But I'm with you. I think Saleh's good. And I think even though their skill position talent is definitely unimpressive outside of Garrett Wilson, and their line isn't good at all. It's really bad. That entire offense sucks. If they did have Aaron Rodgers, I think this would probably be a playoff team. I think that he would elevate them enough to where this defense is that great. So I'm still pro Saleh. I think he gets those guys to play crazy hard too. The Jets just have dogs, man. So I'm aligned with you on this. Well, let's take that alliance into next week, Logan. Another good week of football in the books. Lots of fun stuff that we saw. I'm in New York right now, so this podcast probably won't be on YouTube until the morning just because the hotel Wi-Fi isn't as great. So apologies for that, but I will be back tomorrow, and we will be talking NBA and NFL throughout the week. So if you enjoyed the show, then as always, you can find all of our full shows with video on YouTube. You can also listen to the podcast across audio platforms. You can follow us across social media, TikTok and Instagram at NerdSesh, Twitter at Nerd_Sesh. You can join our Discord. That is at the link tree across our social media bios if you just want to be part of our community, talk football, basketball with us. And you can check out our merch. It is Christmas season. We are currently in the midst of Hanukkah. If you're thinking, oh my God, I can't possibly not get my loved one Nerd Sesh merch for our personal holiday, you're absolutely right. If you don't, they will hate you. And we have a lot of research to support that. So check that out at thevolume.com. And with that, as always, appreciate you guys. I've been Carson Brabber.
I have been Logan Camden.
And this was Nerd Sesh.